Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are opening up a set of documents detailing what seems like a profound miscarriage of justice. Our sources actually describe it as a catastrophic failure of multiple institutional safeguards.
That's a strong statement, and it seems warranted here.
Yeah, we're diving deep into the conviction of Corey C. Murder Miller. And this case, well, it doesn't just involve maybe some flawed testimony or bad luck. It really exposes these deep systemic wounds in the American legal system. So our mission today is to understand how things like prosecutorial misconduct, witness coercion, and these historically racist legal practices, the Jim Crow jury laws, how they all converged.
Right, how they came together to put a man behind bars and, crucially, keep him there, even when the evidence seems to have just crumbled. And this is, more than just a true crime story. It's really an examination of institutional denial. We're not just looking at isolated errors, like you said. We can actually trace a direct line from, 19th century laws rooted in racial discrimination straight to this modern-day conviction. And the resistance the system shows to admitting it might have gotten it wrong. It's striking.
Okay. So for context for everyone listening,
Yeah.
we're talking about Corey Miller, known in music as C. Murder, brother of Master P,
Yeah.
but also, importantly, a United States Army veteran. He was convicted back in 2009. This was for the 2002 murder of a 16-year-old Steve Thomas outside the Platinum Club in Harvey, Louisiana.
And it's critical to understand right from the start that the process was, frankly, messed up from day one. Miller actually had a trial before the 2009 one, back in 2003.
Okay.
And that initial conviction was
How?
overturned
Why was that?
because the prosecution got caught withholding critical evidence, what lawyers call exculpatory evidence stuff that could have pointed towards Miller's innocence.
Wow.
So even before the second trial began, the state had already failed to uphold his basic right to due process. It really sets a concerning stage.
That initial failure definitely sets a tone, yeah. But let's focus on the constitutional problem at the heart of that second trial, the 2009 one. That conviction was secured with a 10-2 jury vote. Now, for most people listening, that just sounds wrong, inherently unfair.
It is inherently wrong. And for a very long time in Louisiana, it was also inherently racist. At the time Miller was convicted, Louisiana and Oregon were the only two states, allowing felony convictions without a unanimous jury.
Okay, so let's unpack that because that history seems absolutely key here. Why? Why did Louisiana even have that rule?
Well, the sources are disturbingly clear on this. It wasn't some random legal quirk. It's a direct legacy of the Jim Crow era. It was put into Louisiana's Constitution back in 1898. This was right after Reconstruction amendments forced the state, basically kicking and screaming, to allow African Americans on juries.
So it was a reaction to that.
A direct workaround. They brought in this non-unanimous rule specifically to make sure that even if, say, one or two black jurors actually got onto a jury, which was hard enough, their votes, their dissenting voices, could just be ignored legally.
So it effectively nullified their presence.
Exactly. It was a mechanism designed explicitly to maintain white control over the courts and make it almost impossible for an all-white prosecution to lose against a black defendant. The intent couldn't be clearer, historically speaking.
So the critical point for you, the listener, is this. If Corey Miller's trial had happened in any of the other 48 states, that 10-2 vote, that's a hung jury.
Correct. No conviction.
It means the prosecution would have to decide, retry the case, maybe with better evidence, or dismiss the charges. Miller was denied that fundamental safeguard simply because of where he was tried under a rule born of racial discrimination.
Now, the good news, if you can call it that after so long, is that this system was eventually dismantled. Louisiana voters passed an amendment in 2018, finally getting rid of non-unanimous juries.
But only going forward, right?
Right. Only for crimes committed after January 1st, 2019. Which didn't help Miller.
And then the Supreme Court weighed in?
Yes, in April 2020. The landmark case, Ramos v. Louisiana, the U.S. Supreme Court confirmed, unequivocally, that non-unanimous verdicts violate the Sixth Amendment right to a fair trial. The court basically acknowledged the racist origins of these laws in Louisiana and Oregon. So now, unanimous juries are required everywhere.
And that's the painful paradox for Corey Miller, isn't it? The highest court confirms his constitutional rights were violated by that 10-2 verdict. But the ruling came almost 2 decades too late for him. He's still in prison based on a conviction under a system we now know was illegal and discriminatory.
It's a tough reality to grapple with.
Okay, so if the constitutional basis was, frankly, rotten, what about the actual facts presented at trial? Because the sources suggest the evidence itself was incredibly weak, even setting aside the jury issue.
That's right. Remember, the conviction rested entirely on eyewitness testimony. There was zero physical evidence linking Miller to the crime.
No gun, no DNA, no fingerprints.
Nothing. No weapon recovered, no forensic link whatsoever. It all came down to what people said they saw in a chaotic situation outside a nightclub.
And what happened with those eyewitness accounts?
This is where it gets really compelling. They completely fell apart. We now have sworn affidavits from 2018 where both of the key prosecution witnesses recanted their trial testimony.
Both of them.
Both. And it's important, like you said, this isn't just someone changing their story casually. An affidavit is a sworn legal document, signed under penalty of perjury.
Meaning they could face charges themselves for lying previously?
Exactly. They felt strongly enough about the truth, or perhaps their conscience, to take that risk.
So who were they? Let's start with Kenneth Jordan. He was a patron at the club, right?
Yes. Kenneth Jordan stated in his affidavit quite clearly that he knows the person who shot Steve Thomas was not Corey Miller. That's a direct statement of innocence.
But why did he say Miller was the shooter at trial then?
He alleges coercion. He claims detectives pressured him, essentially offering him leniency on some other criminal charges he was facing at the time if he identified Miller.
A quid pro quo.
That's what he alleges. Identify Miller, we help you out. He even described the person he did see commit the violence, shooting someone with a dark complexion, wearing a hoodie. Definitely not Corey Miller, according to his sworn statement now.
That points towards a really deliberate effort, potentially, by police to pin this on Miller, maybe because he was high profile.
It certainly raises serious questions. And the second key witness, Darnell Jordan, no relation, I believe, just the same last name. He was a security guard working at the club that night.
And his story.
Similar disturbing pattern. Darnell Jordan also stated under oath in 2018 that he is certain Corey Miller did not shoot Steve Thomas. He said he never even saw Miller with a gun during the whole incident outside the club.
And did he also allege pressure from law enforcement?
He did. He claimed the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office used intimidation tactics to coerce his testimony against Miller during the trial.
So you have this consistent narrative from both crucial witnesses. Police coercion led them to falsely identify Miller. That's not just shaky evidence. That's an allegation of serious systemic misconduct.
It suggests the investigation might have been focused on closing the case on a specific target, C murder, rather than finding the actual truth of what happened that night.
And speaking of Miller's profile, the sources also mention how his background was used against him. It's kind of striking that he was an Army veteran.
Right.
But that positive aspect of his character seems to have been completely ignored or downplayed at trial.
Yeah, that seems to be part of the failure here. The prosecution apparently managed to frame his community ties, his family connections, his music world associate, not as normal relationships, but somehow as evidence of, like, criminal association.
They created a narrative.
Exactly. They used his fame, the chaotic club environment, to build this negative picture that really contrasted with his actual history as a veteran, as a father.
Okay, so let's recap. You've got a conviction based on a jury system now ruled unconstitutional and racist in its origins.
Check.
You have the only two key eyewitnesses recanting under oath, claiming police coerced them into identifying Miller.
Check.
You'd think, logically, that would trigger a new trial almost immediately, but that's not what happened, is it?
No, not at all. This is where you really see that institutional resistance, maybe even pride, kick in. In 2019, Jefferson Parish Judge Sterling Snowdy flat out denied Miller's request for a new trial. And he didn't just deny it, he dismissed all this powerful new evidence, those sworn affidavits, calling them suspect and not reliable.
Suspect and not reliable. But why? What was the justification for dismissing sworn statements alleging innocence and serious police misconduct?
Well, the official reasoning often leans on this general legal skepticism about recantations. Judges often think, well, they lied once on the stand, why should we believe them now?
But doesn't that ignore why they claim they lied? The alleged coercion by the state itself?
Exactly. It sidesteps the core issue. If the state coerced the testimony in the first place, the recantation might actually be the truth finally coming out. But the ruling effectively ignored the constitutional violation and the claims of coercion. The resistance didn't stop there. Just last year, November 2023, a federal judge also upheld Miller's conviction. Despite everything, the evidence of innocence, the unconstitutional jury.
So multiple levels of the judiciary reinforcing the original outcome.
It shows how incredibly difficult it is to overturn convictions, even when they seem deeply flawed. Systems, well, they just don't like admitting they made massive mistakes, especially mistakes involving police, prosecutors, and judges.
Which often means it takes pressure from the outside, right? And we've seen that here. High-profile figures have gotten involved.
Absolutely. Kim Kardashian West, known for her criminal justice reform advocacy, has taken up Miller's cause. She believes he's wrongfully imprisoned and has been pushing for him to get a new trial under a specific Louisiana law that allows for post-conviction review based on new evidence.
And the media played a role too, didn't it? I think there was a TV show investigation.
Yes, the show Reasonable Doubt. Sources suggest their investigation was actually pretty instrumental in encouraging those witnesses, Kenneth and Darnell Jordan, to finally come forward publicly with their recantations. Sometimes that public spotlight is needed.
Which brings us to the bigger picture, the so what for everyone listening. What are the systemic costs of Louisiana digging in its heels like this?
Well, first, there's the straightforward financial cost. Keeping people incarcerated under these now unconstitutional, non-unanimous jury verdicts costs Louisiana taxpayers an estimated $29.8 million every single year.
Wow, nearly $30 million a year to uphold verdicts deemed illegal.
Yes. But the deeper cost, I think, is human and institutional. Louisiana is fighting tooth and nail against applying that Ramos Supreme Court ruling retroactively.
Meaning letting people convicted under the old unconstitutional system get new hearings?
Exactly. And by resisting retroactivity, they're leaving an estimated 1,000 people locked up based on those Jim Crow jury verdicts. Many of them are black citizens convicted when these discriminatory practices were routine. It's like holding an entire group hostage to an unjust past.
It sounds like the state is prioritizing avoiding the hassle and potential fallout over doing what's constitutionally right.
That seems to be the core conflict. There's likely a fear that full retroactivity would open the floodgates, tons of new trials, straining the system, and potentially uncovering decades of police and prosecutorial misconduct that they'd rather keep buried.
So, pulling it all together, what does this Corey Miller case really tell us? It feels like this perfect storm, this terrible intersection of discriminatory history and modern injustice.
It really does. It shows how discrimination baked into law over a century ago, specifically to disadvantaged black citizens, can still operate today. How it can lead to someone, a veteran, a father, potentially spending their life in prison based on a fundamentally unfair process.
The constitutional problem is undeniable now. The evidence for innocence, with the recantations, seems incredibly strong.
It is compelling. So the real question becomes, does the justice system have the integrity, the institutional courage, to admit and fix its own errors, even when those errors are this profound and reach back this far?
Because if it doesn't...
Well, if the system refuses to act on such clear violations and compelling evidence, it massively undermines public trust. How can anyone have confidence in the fairness or reliability of a system that won't correct its own documented failures?
The sources we looked at outline some clear recommendations for achieving justice here. What are they?
Essentially a three-part approach. First, Corey Miller deserves a new trial, period. One with a constitutionally required unanimous jury that can weigh the recanted testimony and lack of physical evidence fairly.
Makes sense.
Second, there needs to be an independent, probably federal, investigation into the specific allegations of police and prosecutorial misconduct. Did officials coerce testimony? That needs to be answered.
Accountability.
Right. And third, systemic reform. Louisiana needs to apply the Ramos ruling retroactively to free those other estimated 1,000 people convicted under the same unconstitutional system. And they need mechanisms to hold prosecutors genuinely accountable moving forward.
That's a comprehensive approach.
It has to be. The sources really drive home this point. Justice delayed is justice denied. And it's frankly shameful that it often takes celebrity advocacy like Kim Kardashian's involvement to even get traction on fundamental constitutional rights that were clearly violated.
So the final thought maybe for you listening is this. What does it actually take? What kind of pressure, legal, political, public, outcry, maybe even financial? What does it take for a justice system to choose truth and constitutional rights over protecting its own image and avoiding administrative headaches?
That's the uncomfortable question. Corey Miller's ongoing incarceration forces all of us to confront. Where does the balance lie between institutional self-preservation and actual justice?